emphasized this morning. You matter, and the work that you do matters. This symposium is a testament to that commitment, providing a space for learning, collaboration, and meaningful conversation that will help shape the future of our institution. Our theme, transforming teaching and learning, advancing student success for the next generation, underscores the evolving nature of higher education and our collective responsibility to adapt to the ever-changing needs of our students. Whether through innovative teaching strategies, student engagement, or expanding access to resources, we all play a role in ensuring that UCF remains a place where students can thrive. During our featured session this morning, we heard from some of our current UCF students and alumni who reflected on their academic experiences and shared practical strategies that work for all students, but are particularly impactful for non-traditional students, including those who are the first in their families to attend college, those that have transferred from one institution or city to another, and those who persevere every day, leveraging their disabilities as motivation. Morning breakout sessions included night safety with UCF PD, supporting our student veterans, faculty shaping student success through high impact practices, making content accessible, and rooms of reality, and immersive and reflective experience. Our students, alumni, and joining speakers reminded us of the importance of our role in making education accessible and attainable, and how our commitment to our students does not merely lead to individual success, but it goes on to favorably transform generations and communities. We hope you found those discussions to be illuminating, and we encourage you to continue those conversations well beyond our time together today. As we turn our attention to this afternoon, we have yet another incredible opportunity to witness a meaningful exchange. This session entitled, I Don't Agree, Civility in Practice, will be moderated by one of our outstanding community partners and informed by quite the dynamic duo. What you are about to experience is a snapshot of more to come. I say this because just recently, UCF was awarded a $3.4 million FIPSE grant from the U.S. Department of Education to develop a model that can be replicated across the state on how to engage in constructive conversation across varying viewpoints. And we hope that you stay tuned to learn more about those opportunities at the end of today's luncheon session. For now, allow me to introduce our moderator this afternoon, Dr. Lua Hancock. Dr. Hancock has 30 years of experience working to create campus communities and empowering and serving college youth and educators. Additionally, Lua is sought after by nonprofits and Fortune 500 companies for consulting, executive coaching, and keynotes in areas of leadership, change management, conflict resolution, strategic planning, assessment, and equity. Lua has served as Vice President of Campus Life and Student Success at Stetson University, and currently serves as Vice President for the Ginsberg Family Foundation, leading their youth leadership movement, Phoenix Generation. Lua is also a mom of a junior at UCF, studying film, and a first-year student at Berry College studying environmental science. With that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Lua Hancock.
Hello. Yeah. Hi. It's been like a homecoming. I've known somebody from higher ed in Central Florida. Thank you. Of course, I am a mom of a knight, and I just texted him about an hour ago and said, "Hey, come have lunch with me." And he's like, "No, thanks, I'm busy." There you go. Just right across campus. But Totally fine. So thank you so much for having me today. We love working. I'm with the Ginsburg Center. You have the Ginsburg Center, so we love working together. So I'm super excited to be here today. So let's get it started. Oh, I would be remiss. Let me just say one more thing, especially to Cynthia and to Dr. Guzman and your whole area. Congratulations on your Gipsy grant. That is amazing. We really get national best practice cutting edge work, and I'm super excited to be a small part of it. So yes, let's bring our panelists up on stage. You can read their full bio in your program, which I encourage you to do because they're both accomplished and long-serving members of this institution. So please help me welcome Dr. Ilana Andrews, who's the Assistant Vice President of the Ginsburg Center for Inclusion and Community Engagement, and Mike Kepner, who serves as the Director of the Office of Military and Veteran Student Success. So, we're gonna have you all sit next to each other. Wow. Well, that's a good walkout these days. You just follow me around, that'd be good. Yes, welcome. That was nice, I did.
You're welcome. We're crazy to start something like this out.
So thank you so much for being with us today. I love the thought of this workshop, which is to take some conversations that you will all have had as professionals and do them in the public sphere. So I'm really excited about this. So maybe we could start by just give us the short version of a little bit about yourself and maybe what inspired you to be involved with this session today.
Oh, why, thank you, Mike. So Mike and I, well, okay, Kip and I, we have these conversations a lot. And they're random. Sometimes when he stops by my office or we're on Teams or whatever, we have these conversations. And a lot of times it's like, I don't agree with that. Like, but we also are like, well, tell me more. And so when we were putting together this conference, and this was prior to us being awarded the FIPSI grant, and so it was like, this is awesome. We wanted to be able to practice civility in action because there are times when people have conversations and you should either shut down, you get mad, or you just no one results to violence, right? That's not we don't do that. But some people do. But Mike and I, we've been able to have some very good conversations where we have not agreed. But we've been able to still work together and we do some great stuff, right? I think so. No?
Yeah, we do. We do. I would agree. There's an audience here. Hi.
Yeah.
How do you follow up Dr. Andrews? So I'll start with this. This discussion today, this conversation today. So since I started here 3.5 years ago, Dr. Andrews has been my mentor. And she's fulfilled that obligation very well, actually. But as part of that, and challenging myself to grow into higher education, those that know me, 23 years in the Army, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But coming to higher education was like jumping, where's Andrew? It was like skydiving. You just hope the parachute opens as you jump into this higher education world. And we've had a lot of conversations and discussions because we don't look alike. We don't think alike. And with our backgrounds, and we'll talk about those in a second, for me, it's been so helpful to get a higher education professional viewpoint of some of the things I struggle with, because y'all are the most welcoming people. All right. So this conversation is important today because we've kind of broken the barrier on how you talk to each other without agreeing and still agree. And it's kind of neat. So I'll let you go back to you, man, when we started.
Yeah, I love this because I think often, like you were saying, Dr. Andrews, that when we have somebody who maybe philosophically we don't align with completely, we do one of two things. We either argue or we just don't hang out with them. And both of those are a way to separate. as opposed to a way to lean in, which is what y'all have chosen to do, which is the harder path, the more mature path. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. How do you think that you talked a little bit about it, but let's dig in more. Your identity, your background, your upbringing, how does it inform your thought process and you being at UCF today? I mean, we bring all of that with us. So, I mean, thank you for your service. You shared a little bit, but tell me a little bit when you come into this environment with all of your background, your values, what are those and how does it inform you in your work life daily?
Interesting conversation. So 23 years in the Army, 4 years I went to a military college. So my entire life, I have been focused on becoming an officer of the military. All I've ever known, all I've ever wanted to do. But part of that, when you talk about background, you talk about how that gets you where you are. One of the things about growing up in the military from 1993 to 2016 is it was a really interesting time, both in our military and then in our civilian world. When you think about the military, generally, you think of us as very conservative, very right-leaning, very strong on that side of the world. Well, we also look at higher education professionals, and I'll be very blunt, I'm sorry if I offend you, as tree-hugging liberals. Not gonna lie. That was how we viewed the higher education professions for my entire military career. We went to college on bases because the on-base instructors were former military, and we knew we could trust them. We did not enroll in colleges to go to faith-to-faith classes unless we had to, because we did not want to be indoctrinated to the culture. That was the background I came into higher education with. So when I started this, it was cool. I started my higher education career at Valencia College doing workforce development, short-term training programs. That was a lot easier because that was focused on workforce. That was focused on getting people into careers and jobs. Coming to UCF terrified me for a number of reasons. One, I was a student veteran here. If you were fortunate enough to sit through my breakout session, one of those lucky few that came up there, you heard the story. My first semester, I sat in class with a young lady who was born after I commissioned into the Army and listened to her tell me about her worldviews. You never left your mother's basement. What do you know about the world? Much different perspective. And I've had to adjust to that. That's where our conversations are so uncomfortable because I've learned that some of y'all are trustful. I can actually talk to you. And it's been very, very eye-opening and very, very amazing for me to go on this journey. So that's a little bit about my background and where I came from as I approached this journey into higher education.
And want to tell me a little bit about the values, the upbringing, the identities, and how they inform where you are now at UCF?
Yeah, so one, I'm a Black woman. My salient identities, I can't take off my Blackness, I can't take off my womanhood. So they present with me when I enter any room. And so growing up, I saw education as the equalizer that it's supposed to be. And so for me, it was my mom gave me options after high school graduation. She was like, you either go to one of the armed forces, or you go to college, or you have 6 months to get a job. Well, I wasn't able to lose weight to get into one of the armed forces, so I decided to go to college. And so for me, it was like, okay, education is that equalizer. It's that equalizer where I could sit at a table, I could do this, I could be that, and be seen beyond just my salient identities. And so that's my view of education. And then Kev talked about his military experience. And so for me, my father was a sergeant in the Air Force. And I did not, and we've had this conversation, I did not until recently, like maybe last semester, did I embrace the fact that my father was a veteran. I mean, he's buried up at Bushnell. I've been there, I go there, but I never really embraced the fact that that part of my father as a veteran, and that was because for me, looking at the veteran, I saw what I saw in my community, which were the black men who were drafted during the time because he was there during Vietnam. And how when they came back, while others had access to certain things, they did not have access to certain things. And then I saw also the mental health challenges that some of them had, and they didn't have access to the support. And so I was angry at that because I didn't have, that experience of, my father was a veteran and to be proud and stuff because of all of that. And actually my conversations with Kev have really helped me to understand things a lot better. I've asked questions. I've been aggressive and frustrated. But his openness to also share with me his military experience has helped me to embrace the fact that my father was a veteran. And so like now I'm proud child of a veteran who served in the Air Force. And so I now can go to Bushnell to his grave and be proud of being there and being his daughter. And so that's how I come into conversation. I'm also first gen. My mom, she didn't know about college, and so I came up here to UCF, and I chose UCF over an HBCU because I was like, I don't know if this girl gonna do right with the Black experience. I wasn't ready for this, and so I chose to come here to UCF, and I had to figure out, I had to find my way because there was no one here that I knew. And so I had to find my way and figure it out. And so that's why, like, I think strategically and I'm a problem solver and a planner and things like that. And so that all informs like how I approach things and conversations and how I engage with Kev.
And one, sorry, go ahead.
If I can just derail that for 1 second.
This is how we talk.
This is what we do. Yeah. So as we talked about backgrounds, and Dr. Andrews said something that is so impactful to me. Not very recently, she said this to me. Again, I'm in the military, and the military is the most diverse organization you are ever going to find. There is every race, color, ethnicity, sexual orientation. Doesn't matter, all exist, and we're all focused on the mission. None of it matters to us because we're focused on wearing green and getting the mission accomplished and achieving the objective.
Not everyone wears green.
All right, so we'll say we're privileged where it's unforced. Well, one day, Dr. Andrews and I were having a conversation, and she said something that struck my background and struck me so powerfully because I never thought about it the way she said it. And what she said was, every time I walk into the room, people see a Black female. And I stopped for a minute because that just floored me. Because when she walks into a room that I'm in, I see Dr. Andrews. I see a mentor, a friend, someone I can go to for advice. I don't think about Black female. But when she said that, that made me pause just for a minute to think about our conversations and to think about how each one of us comes into a situation. I come into it with a military viewpoint. I don't ever once think about the rest of them. So as we have our conversation today, that's another piece of our backgrounds and where we come from and kind of how we can sit and talk to each other some days.
Yeah, and Juan, you mentioned that you've done everything from learn to been mad in this relationship. Tell me a little bit about what you've learned from the times when you can stay in the learning space and what you've learned about yourself from the times that you can't stay in the learning space.
Well, there was a time when Kev had asked me, I had went to this conference, and so he was asking me about the conference. He's like, well, why is that conference and this and that? And I was at the moment I wasn't able to respond to what he was asking because the conference was a population specific conference or whatever. And so I just kind of, was continuing to talk with him and everything like that. And we ended our conversation, but it still sat with me and it just sat with me in a space. And I don't know if y'all like if you ever had a conversation, like after the conversation, you're like, oh, I wish I would have said this, I wish I would have said that. Oh, so I actually decided to text him and say, Kev, you know what, from our conversation, this is how that made me feel. And I explained it in a way that made sense to him. Because I was like, hey, why do you attend, veteran specific conferences? And so when I explained it like that, he was like, I get it. And so in that moment, I took the risk of putting my feelings out there and saying, that conversation we had, what you said, how you approached it, it really didn't sit with me. And this is a colleague. Like this is somebody that I have to work with. Not, I can avoid them or anything like I have, but we shouldn't say super much. So I have to work with him. And so I was nervous because I didn't know how he would respond because he could have been like, whatever. But he was like, no, tell me more. And we had a great dialogue from that exchange. And I feel like we even gained a deeper respect and appreciation because we are able to genuinely to be honest and transparent with each other. And so, when the doors are closed, we have conversations. But we also are like, all right, I'll see you later. What you doing? Let me make sure did you eat? Like what you did. So we're still able to engage in a manner where it's not fake. Like it's like, okay, I understand your views, you understand my views, we don't agree, but I still respect you.
Yeah, I think I wanted to pull out a few things that they're mentioning here for anybody who's watching at home or here, because this can be hard work. And I talk with a lot of people who are like, I would like to know how to do this better. I would like to know how to respectfully disagree with someone. So the things that you mentioned about, actually being curious, both of you saying, okay, tell me more, being willing to, and then I think also when I work with people in conflict resolution, they think, oh, I have to compromise my views to, this relationship. And you're saying, I don't have to. I can still go back and believe in what I'm saying, but I've listened, I've listened. What else have you learned, Kev, in your kind of conflict resolution strategy you learned from this relationship, or what did you learn about yourself when you all agreed with it?
I think one of the greatest things I learned about myself is just using the example I just used. As a military person, as I don't know, been mildly successful in my life, but I've been military all my life, and we speak a certain way. So when I approach Dr. Angel with a question or a challenge, I don't know how to do it the way it's not direct. Very direct. So one of the things I've learned about that conversation, that text that she sent me, it floored me. It literally floored me when she sent me that text because it made me pause and say, whoa. Because in my mind, I just asked a question. It was nothing. It was just a question. But one of the things that I learned about myself is that how when I, as a military member, based on my experiences and being very direct with people, brash, abrasive, whatever you want to call it, direct sounds like nicer, doesn't it?
Then that language.
Yeah, I like that. That helped me realize that there's better ways to communicate with people, that you don't have to be as direct, that you can phrase things in a way that aren't necessarily causing wounds or causing people to be offended. Because I go back to that text and Dr. Andrew has not reached out to me with that text and made me pause and think about where we were at that moment. I don't know if we have any other conversation, but that really opened up the doors to me to say, okay, let's think about how we approach some of these things a little bit differently and think about who you are as a person and how you talk to others.
And are there times also when she has shared things like that, that you were like, that's not how I do it?
Oh,
Now, you already said it in the moment, as opposed to what she did, which is went back and said, I wish I would have said something, maybe you just said it, but.
I generally just say what I would say. There's no stopgap here. It just talks.
But yeah, you said when you were introducing yourself, you talked about education and how you saw us as tree hugging liberals. I don't hug you. FYI. But you have been here at UCF for a while, so I am curious to know, how has your view of education changed? Like, you just brought this up. Oh, I'm sorry,
You should be,
I would like to, I would like to.
Now they both turn their chairs facing me.
wanna lead in?
This is like how, like, but I mean, seriously, like you've been here, we talked about language and stuff, and you have done a great job in molding our military, veteran students, our connected students, our dependent students in an educational setting. You have 2 degrees, like, you go get the third one, but I mean, has your view of education changed from when you were in the military?
Yes,
How?
but okay. So I've been on campus as an employee for almost 4 years. I will tell you that so I started in 2022. Think about where the world was in 2022. We just come out of COVID, we just had a contested election, we just had all these other things going on. So when I started here, I will tell you that I felt like the only conservative person on campus. I felt very isolated. You know, if you all go back to remember those annual surveys we sent, they go out in email, and 17% of us choose to answer them. The first one that came out was, do you feel free to voice your opinion on campus? And I was like, there's no way in the world I'm going to answer this question, because I know it's linked to my email and coming back to me. And I ignored the survey. There was times I've been told I'm a chameleon because of how I try to fit in different places. So as I've done this over the last 4 years and met people in education, my perception and my reality has shifted dramatically, because I've been able to form friendships and bonds with folks at UCF that have completely flipped what my overall perception was of higher education. Because I realized you can't lump everybody together under one qualifier. That everybody has an identity, and we're all kind of our own individual person. And it took me working with a lot of people in this room, to start to see that, to understand that, and to understand where some of my own perceptions and values and things that I've grown up with were misaligned to what reality is. So yeah, it has changed. But I still feel, there are times when I go into a room, where I am the only one, and where you are still looked at, you're the military guy. There's a perception that comes with being the military guy. Especially when, you talk about 4 combat deployments, people, you blow people up. Okay. So you still get those feelings too. But over 4 years, that position has really mellowed. It's grown I've gained a lot more respect for higher education, to the point where now I've got friends who are getting ready to retire from the military. And the one thing I encourage all of them to do is explore options in higher education, because it's really a great place to work. And they look at me like I'm crazy. And then we have that conversation about why I enjoy what I do. So yeah, my perception's changed.
Can you say you feel like a chameleon?
Yeah,
Without the camera?
without the camera.
Want to share more about that?
What you make though, that like, seeing the diversity within a group, right? Like you think, oh, veterans, they're like this, you know what I mean? Or higher ed, they're like this. I was thinking this earlier when Juana was sharing about her dad's experience and your experience, how they were similar, how they were different. My dad was also a Vietnam vet. And he, has struggled a lot with thinking about what that means to him even. And we haven't talked about it for much at all. And just recently, we had the opportunity unexpectedly to go on a long vacation with each other. And at dinner, long dinner, she started telling me about his experience for the first time, like in our life. And it was so amazing. And we live in the same house and we don't agree on everything. And some of that was because he was afraid that, I don't know, he would be judged. And we were going to be fair, probably because there are some places where he would be. So you talked a little bit about what you've taken away and how you've complicated your thoughts about higher ed. What do you bring as an asset to this place that you wish was more valued sometime? No, that's
So assets that I bring. Jack Granders is not a gun. No, not a gun. Assets I bring to the university. I'll go back to my earlier days. So one of the great things about having 23 years in the military is you can learn some very, very simple planning techniques and decision-making techniques. And so one of the really neat assets that I would bring into this is the ability to sit down and work with a group of folks to develop a plan and put it into action. To make sure there's the right task condition to the standards, to make sure we know what the right decisions are that have to be made. So we're not just floundering and trying just to everyone do their project. No, there's actual purpose and task and a unified vision of where we're going. So I think the one thing that is a senior leader of the military that you bring into a place like this is just the ability to stay calm and the ability to just do decision making thinking under stress, because that's where we live. So that's probably the best answer I can come up with. Such a short. Wow.
So I would like to add to that. I think you also bring great passion. You bring a great posture for wanting to make UCF, the UCF experience impactful, meaningful, and purposeful for those who are former military or military connected students, for all the military families. Like, you want their experience with UCF to be good. You do. You want them, like, you have a true passion for UCF, like you got the nitro socks on. And
You don't support Rock'em Socks, you're wrong.
but you have that passion, which is evident in what and how you lead your team and what your team has been able to do. And that passion is what has helped me to be able to embrace my military connection. Because before, I mean, most people did not know, like I didn't share. But because of your passion and the events that you do, and you make me attend. I'm just joking. I attend, but I attend and I'm there, and you bring in speakers. Like, it's helped me open up my mind and open up my willingness to learn and embrace. And you talk about your dad. Now sharing about his Vietnam experience. I wish my father was alive, because I'm like, bro, I got questions. And so I even talked to Kev. I was like, hey, so the one guy that came and talked, can I talk to him about his experience? Because I'm like, I want to know more about the experience as much as I can to help me continue to embrace my connection.
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned from being in higher ed so long and having a lot of connections to the military and students who have served in the military is that sometimes people don't make the connection that higher education and the military are two spaces where there's so much diversity. And so a lot of people reflect later and cherish the fact that they were in a place that was very integrated across a lot of different barriers, and that changed their mind because they were around a lot of people who had a centralized mission in some way towards working for an issue. And one thing you all do well, which we try to train people to do, is You can still have an issue that you don't agree on, but you stay on the same side of the table and the issue's over there and you're talking about it, as opposed to you're on opposite sides of the table. And I use that analogy often with people because you can feel the difference when we're on opposite sides of the table, or when we're talking about something we don't agree on, but the issue is on the table, you know? And you stepped out of your comfort zone to be in this learning zone, which is not comfortable, which occasionally pushes you into your excited zone. But then you can learn from each other. So if you have advice for people who are like, man, I'm thinking of someone who I work with or live with or am in the community with right now, and I don't know how to do this with them. Do you guys have advice?
I mean, I know you have to think about what's the value of that person in your environment. And if it's a person that you are gonna regularly interact with, do you always wanna look at that person and roll your eyes and hope nobody sees it? Or, because we do that, let's be honest, we do that. Or do you want to be like, you know what? I don't agree with a lot of what they say, but let me lean in and one kind of investigate why don't I agree, and then maybe let me find out, let me learn more, let me ask questions, and you may find that asking questions really levels. I don't want to say levels the playing field, but it creates an environment of inquisitivity, where it's not hostile and people are like, why you not? Sorry, that was. But
Come in there, don't act like you're that.
but you because if you enter with a posture of learning, and I always enter spaces with a posture of learning, wanting to learn more, wanting to understand. Because a lot of times when Kevin and I talk, I'm like, I don't understand that. Like, explain that to me. And he'll be like, I don't understand that language either. And so we genuinely want to learn more and understand it takes time. It takes time. Like, you're not going to immediately have a conversation with someone off the bat. But do you want to have that conversation is the first question. And if you want to have that conversation, think about how can you create the environment where you can have a conversation where the person won't feel attacked, they won't feel hostile. And we talked about language and how you approach things. Ask someone, how to help or whatever. Maybe ask someone to come in and mediate or whatever. Lula may be available to mediate conversations, but ask yourself, do you want to? And then if you do, enter with a posture of wanting to learn and not shut down and to truly listen, not listen to respond, but to listen to understand.
And I think that's the secret, is being willing to listen. Because that's something I struggle with all the time. I mean, any married guys in the room? Yeah.
What about raising, wait on that, sir.
So, listening is so critically important to having conversation. So as I came into this space, I didn't know anything about being in higher education. I knew workforce development. I knew short-term industry certification programs. I could talk to you about how to operate a CNC machine, how to operate both MIG and TIG welders all day long. I could even teach you how to wire an electrical switch in our mechatronics program. But coming here was terrifying. And a lot of that was not just being willing to listen, but a lot of it is also being willing to admit you don't know anything. And once you can admit that you are less than knowledgeable about what you're trying to do, and be open to asking people for help, and be willing to approach others who have been doing this forever, then you can start to have honest conversations. But first, you got to be honest with yourself and let yourself know that I need help, and be willing to ask that question first.
Yeah, here's something I've always found ironic a little bit in higher education, is that we encourage students to learn and be open into behaviors that sometimes we don't roll out of ourselves. And I have seen that happen in higher education administration and faculty, student leaders. Sometimes it's easier to preach it than it is to do it. And they're watching too, right? So it's harder to say, okay, we're a learning community. That's not top down. That's all the way across, up, down, sideways, right? So if I'm a part of this learning community, can I ask a curious question? Can I say, what's going on with me? Why am I so pissed if they said that? Something must be, So we do a program here with UCF called Home for the Holidays, where students come and they practice how they're going to respond to the most ridiculous thing that's going to be said at the Thanksgiving dinner table. Okay, and it's an awesome program. It's super fabulous. But one thing that we train them is what you said, which is to ask a curious question. To say, you and I are in the same family. How do you think that we have such different views on that? Where did that come from for you? You said this too, asking a genuine question. When you ask a genuine question, what it gives to the other person too, because often they go, where did that come from for me? Let's talk about that. So now you're like talking together, right? So I'm gonna give you guys a second. We're about to open it up in a few minutes to questions. So if you have a question, that you've been wanting to ask, they're pretty open up here. So please feel free, and please be taking a note about who you're gonna talk to after this session. So talk a little bit about, both you work, with a lot of veterans and students who are active military, I'm sure too, and who have to take time off and whatever. How do you think that these skills of human connection and dialogue help our students, and how do we show them how to do that?
One of the first things I laughed. So one of the first things I said to Dr. Andrews when she started speaking of my mentor was that I completely lacked emotional intelligence skills. That I had no idea how to approach conversations or to be polite and all those things.
He was used to giving orders.
Yes. So what we do now, I've grown a lot. I've learned a lot. Not perfect yet. I'll openly admit that. When we do our military students, though, is I look at them the same as myself, and they're in the same boat that I was. And I've been retired from the Army now for 10 years, and I'm still trying to figure out civilianese. Talking to civilians is not always easy because we speak different languages. I've got acronyms and words that mean something to, I could say something to Ken Lighty in the back that is a military acronym, and he gets it completely, and nobody else seems to understand that. So what we try to do with our military students in our active duty is start preparing them now for that second transition to become a high quality employee. Teach them how to be, I don't want to say a civilian, but teach them how to be social. Teach them how to be open and receptive to other viewpoints and other thoughts. Because we are, and I think about myself, we are a closed-minded society in the military. We believe what we believe. We believe that the mission, the task, the purpose, and that's it. Don't bring everything else to us because it's what I'm going to care about. But here, higher education, civilian roles, you got to care about more aspects. The conversation that Dr. Andrews and I have had has just been eye-opening in how I approach life. So trying to bring that to our military students, specifically our student veterans, is so critical to their future success. And that's why we're trying to wrap some new things up into that for them.
Talking about language, when we were planning for the symposium, we were working on some of the session titles, and one of the session titles was Left plus Bank.
Left of bank.
No, it was not. It was written left plus sign bank. How many people know what that means? Okay. So I put it in the chat with us, and I said, I don't understand what this means. We need to change the title. Kip chimes in, I know what it means. I said, well, does the average person, do civilians know what that means? And what does it mean since you know what it means? And so he told me what it means, and I was like, oh, well, because it was, what does it mean, Kip?
So left of bank, it is military terminology, but what it means is, here's the event. You're trying to get left of it. If you get left of it, it means you can stop it or change the outcome. So if you get left of the bang, you might not get blown up. So that's what it means.
Yes.
It makes sense.
To you.
Perfect. Listen, I saw people nod their heads. They understood
To
that.
you. So we're going back back and forth, and I was like, I do not agree with keeping this title. And he's like, well, I understand it. It'll be fine. Just keep it. No, I don't agree with this. People are not going to understand it. They're not going to know what the session is about. We're going to have to explain it explicitly in the description, provide a 2-paragraph description so people will know what it is. And so when we talk about language, that's one of those things where it's like he knows what it means, and he's like, I know what it means and keep it. And I'm like, no, we don't know what it means. I am.
But that's where language is important though. Yeah, that's where open, honest dialogue is important because I know what left and bad means because of my career. But as we have this conversation and Dr. Andrews is adamant that we're changing the title, I'm like, why? Like, this is normal language in my world. But as you go have this conversation, you realize that it's not normal to everybody else. So for Mike and for UCFPD, we knew what that meant. We knew what they were trying to do with it because of our backgrounds. But as Dr. Andrews explained to me from her perspective, eventually you're like, you know what? This is probably not one you want to battle over. Just change the name. It's going to be okay.
But I'm also just saying, I think sometimes also that with students from diverse backgrounds, including military students, the title maybe is not the title because enough people don't know what it is. But also, I think we ask a lot of students to assimilate to a higher level language also. And so I think that I love when someone can describe what something means to them cross-culturally, which honestly there's a cross-cultural conversation. You're from a different culture. We have our own words, we have our own terms, we have our own vision, we have our own way of thinking. So I think sometimes, especially like when I'm faculty in a classroom or I'm advising the club in order, like this is hard these days, y'all, to do that and to make sure that you don't say something you shouldn't say. We're gonna step on but when I include the voices that are there, I've had the opposite experience with someone who works for me. Dave, I love you. Thank you for your service. Who works with me, who's in the military, who's been a combat veteran, was medically released, and he won't tell me anything. Like how you're gonna, say I'm just in my opinion. That's the way he is so ma'am me, and I'm like, no, sir. Like I actually want your opinion. So this is what I've had to work with him on. And some of the veteran students I've had, I'm like, you're allowed to talk to what you might think is authority or whatever. I want your voice in this space.
We struggle with that, Tim.
Yeah.
We struggle with that. I will forever, it does not matter who you are. You are ma'am, you are sir. It's who we are. But again, there's times we will not offer an opinion because we don't know or we're not prepared for what that response is going to be. Because as a military member, we are so, especially 20 years, even worse. I don't want to pick on, I'm sorry. Even worse are the Marines. Because the Marine Corps is so indoctrinated into the Eagle Globe and Anchor, that's all they know from the minute they pin it on. So there's times when we are almost terrified of offering an opinion because one, we don't ask it received. Two, we don't have the words or the articulated ability to defend what we're saying because in our way, this is what it is, just drive off. So it scares us. But that's part of what the process has got to be to something like this where we learn how to talk to each other. Dr. Andrews taught me how to use big words. Yes, it's scary. But that's all part of it.
I also wonder what kept us shared this feeling of not being hesitant to share because you don't know how it's going to be responded to. You're coming from a different culture. Anyone of a non-military background relate? I think there are times where as a woman or, maybe some different identity, a religious minority, I felt the same way, let me, and so I think when we start to make these relationships, we realize that some of that might be actually in common. Yeah.
Being on a college campus, when you start talking about things, I mean, listen, I got 23 years in the Army. I've been around the world. I've done amazing things. There are still things that happen on a college campus, whether it's a student protest or the next movement, whatever it is, that I really want to go out there and scream, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? But I can't
And we've talked about that.
right? We've had lots of conversations about that.
Let's do one more, let's do this. Okay, talk about it.
So, like, I just want to jump up and tell you, you have no idea what your protesting is, you have no idea what you're talking about. But again, in my role as an administrator, I can't do that. So I call her, and I yell at her about what's going on.
And then I ask you, are they protesting or are they doing a demonstration?
Right, then we have the word conversation.
Exactly, because there's a difference. There's a difference between demonstrating and protesting. And a lot of times when we use the word protest, it weaponizes the activity when it's a demonstration. And so we talked about this.
We just had this conversation.
Yeah, because it's also because we are on a college campus and our students, they feel how they feel. And they're free to feel how they feel and to do things and stuff. And so when they are expressing themselves, it's very important that we're using the appropriate language that needs to be used, because when you're using a protest, there's a different type of readiness or response that comes versus a demonstration. So it's important that we understand, is it a protest or is it a demonstration, and we use the appropriate language, because the last thing we want to do is to have an inappropriate readiness because a word was used incorrect.
Yeah, and that goes back to language, how we communicate with each other, because we actually, this is a conversation we've had, and then, I go across campus and I watch things happen, and I'm like, okay, I just keep walking. Doesn't matter who you are, what table you are, what group you are, I just keep walking. But we had this conversation about protest demonstration, because I used the word protest. Because in my world, that's what we grew up with. There was no demonstration, there was protest, that's what we were worried about in the military. So having conversations like this again, that was one of those education spots for me to learn about the perception of those words and how those words can be seen and viewed by different cultures, groups, societies, events, so that we as an organization can try to move forward in a way to resolve things, in a way to find solutions to things that we see. So that was another one of those really important events for me, because I grew up in the world. So Dr. Andrews once again trying to teach me something that I had to learn.
Great time and place, though, it's good to hear why people, whether we all have multiple identities, whether it's of a certain generation or military background or whatever, have the type of response that they have. That's important to know too. That, hey, let me tell you what this brings up for me. So last couple weeks ago, we had a gathering. Our offices are right by Lake Eola, and a bunch of the students came, and there was a demonstration standing up for the rights of Iranian citizens, right? And it was interesting because it was so loud and like right in our workshop. And during the break, 3 or 4 different people came up to me and told me what I was bringing up for them in different ways. One, my friend Dave, who's a veteran and who, has basically lived in some of these areas, and his thoughts. And then another student who's of a Muslim background, who is talking about the intersection with faith and the intersection with his faith. And I realized they all talked to me individually. No one had talked to each other. They didn't feel like, even though we're doing dialogue work, they didn't bring this up. So I think it's really important, whether we all have something to learn, we do, that there's spaces where we feel like we can share, even if it's not fully polished, even if it's not fully thought out, that I can share, man, this is why I feel like I just gotta keep walking, So we're all part of that learning community. So we're gonna open it up online or in person. Don't be shy. I don't know if we have a mic runner or something, but what questions do you all have? I think we have one right there.
Like the limitation of this gross content behavior paradigm. Because I was talking this way, the same way as civility, do versus the overthing. I didn't know what your thoughts are. Like, I was talking to this way, it's great, but what is like different things related to hierarchy impact how you think. I just didn't want your thoughts on things.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's actually something I meant to share in the beginning is I recognize that I have privilege in certain spaces and even in our relationship or whatever. I mean, every time Kev calls me ma'am, I always give him a look and like, it's 4 years later and I'm still not used to it. But it's also too asking yourself about the relationship that you want to have with that person, the rapport that you want to have with that person. And so when I'm having conversations, even with students about things and they're sharing stuff and I may not agree with them, I understand that in that moment, I may be seen as the administrator and Dr. Andrews and everything like that. But I'm also curious to know a little bit more about them. And so it's about setting that environment. Is your environment welcoming where it kind of allows them to feel comfortable asking questions like Andrew, he asked me a lot of questions. We joke around a lot. And he's a student. But he also feels very comfortable coming to me and sharing with me things, and we have great conversations. And I'm like, okay, what are you looking to do? And how can I help you with other opportunities? And Andrew, don't be saying stuff like that. Like you shouldn't be doing that. There's times because we have that relationship. So it's about also building the rapport. And then sometimes when you don't have an opportunity to build that rapport, you have to address things like right then on the spot. That's when Kev comes in and shares. How do they do that?
You just tell them. So it's, our one is really interesting. So we coach a lot of students. There's over 3,500 military connected students on campus. 60% are family members. 40% are veterans. You don't talk to a veteran the same way you talk to a family member. There is a huge age difference. Family members are 18 to 23, veterans are 36 to 42. There's a different approach to how you speak to them. There's a different veteran to veteran, there's a different connection in how I'll talk to him. But yes, there is a hierarchy of how we do things. Like she will always be Dr. Andrews. I will consider her a lifelong friend, but she'll always be Dr. Andrews because that's how I grew up. I don't know that I've ever called her Delana in my life. Nor like, no, it was an example. Don't I think I ever will. One of the things we talked about how you communicate, how you connect with people. I was stunned 3.5 years ago when I started here, when Jamia and Dr. Guzman and Dr. Andrews just started calling me Kevin. I was like, huh? But it stuck. And that was a nickname I had as a kid. But to me, it was such a remarkable recognition of who I was. They felt so comfortable just calling me Captain. And I took that as a badge of honor. And I embraced it. So it is. It's how you learn that hierarchy, how you learn those people so that you can have those conversations. Because it's different with everyone you meet. It really is.
Yeah, not everybody's gonna have this curious relationship, right? So like, let's be real. There are times when there is a hierarchy situation and your opinion is not something someone else wants to listen to, especially people who are traditionally not in a power role or have been minoritized, have to be careful. Like we're gonna say here, oh, just be curious and share your opinion. But you also have to, there is the reality. When I became a vice president, I was so shocked at, like, I just thought, oh, my door's always open, everybody can talk to everybody, but that's also not true. I do have a title, and I have to recognize that that title often makes people not want to share their opinions. I was just actually talking to Dr. Kathleen Plinsky about this. She's the president of Valencia College, if you don't know her. And she was sharing that she was like training some of her leaders to offer dissenting opinions because it was something that people didn't do with the president, and that she wanted this. She needed these alternative, voices in the room. She also shared that she does this thing with ChatGPT on the way to work where she says out loud things that she's going to say in a speech or things that she's thinking about, and then tells ChatGPT to debate with her, which I loved. I thought that was really funny. But yes, I think obviously there are power dynamics in the room, and we all know somebody who you could try this with and it might not work. But I think that offering it to say, hey, I'm curious about this is something I've wondered about, is something that we could all try to do. Yeah, other question?
You kind of spoke to this just a little bit about, um, just seeing the value of the person and being willing to admit that you might not know everything. But it seems like the premise of your relationship is you know each other, or just by sheer proximity, have to know each other. How does one develop that, or how would you encourage the audience, no matter who it is, to set yourself in a posture that makes civility discussion even possible? Because a lot of it comes from motivation. With strangers, if you're trying to enter a conversation, if one's trying to understand and the other's trying to convince and convert, it's like you're missing shifts. So it just seems like you have a very special magic, but I'm just like, how do you or can you translate that, to other environments? Absolutely. I mean, what you said is true. Not everyone. I don't have these conversations with everyone that I work with. Yeah. Because, like you said, people want to of convince you a lot of times that they're a good person, and that's why they believe that way, or they believe that way and they're still a good person. And you may not agree. And so it goes back to the question of, how much a relationship do you want to have with that person? Because you are the determinant of what the relationship will look like if you have a relationship with that person. And so when you think about motivation, it's the motivation that comes from within you. I mean, because with Cap, I didn't have to be transparent with him and talk about my disconnect with my father being in the military. But he would always, whenever I wasn't able to attend an event, he would always be like, "That's okay. I know you don't like military people. I know you don't like the veterans. I know you don't like us." And so I was like, "That's not true. I do like y'all." But one time he said it, and I said, "Darn it, I'm gonna tell you the truth." And it wasn't, and I didn't miss the event because I don't like veterans or whatever. But I told him about my disconnect. And I told him, and again, this is 4 years. Year one, we weren't, because he was doing all these pillars and stuff. And I'm like, "God, you crazy. Like, what are you doing? Like, don't do that." He wanted nothing I had to say. He was off doing his own thing. But because I was like, you know what? The work that he's trying to do is meaningful to the students on this campus. And I had that little piece of connection hidden inside of me that I didn't even share about. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be invested in this. I'm gonna be like, all right, give this bald headed guy a chance and have a conversation. Because I mean he's bruh, this. But because he is direct. He is direct. So it took me a while to even want to engage with him. I'm like, he's so direct, he's rude. He's rude. But I also had to understand where he was coming from. And so because of my willingness to want to engage with him, to have that relationship, that's where my motivation came. And as we engaged more and more and more, I wanted to learn more. I wanted to engage more. I wanted to understand more how I can help, how I can be a support, how I can, help him brainstorm and erase his whiteboard and start over and all those things. And so it's because I said, I want to know more. I want this relationship. So it really starts with you. Do you want to have that relationship? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a very deep relationship. It could be like, you know what? I just want to be able to engage with this person and not roll my eyes or not want to walk out of the room. So it could be as simple as that, wanting to have a relationship where you can not roll your eyes or will not want to run up out of the room because they open up their mouth like, oh, I did what they going. So it's true.
It's true. It's true.
And so it's that motivation. I don't know, Kev, your motivation engage with me.
Dr. Guzman told me I had to. She said she's your mentor, talk to her. But the reality of it was is that it's just that is I met Dr. Andrews and we just had a connection, and then we got seated on the persistence committee together. And I think that's really where it took off, because at that point we kind of realized we both had the same thought process and the same mentality when it came to how we serve the students. And so we found a common connection because we were the ones who sat next to each other. We actually did roll our eyes at some of the people that were in there with us. And I'm honest. We got in trouble once or twice. But we found a common connection that allowed us then to grow the relationship into what it is today. Because one of my most valued relationships here at the university with Dr. Andrews. But it starts with knowing yourself, knowing what kind of relationship you want to have with a person. I did 23 years in the Army, and I will tell you to this day, for my military career, I've got 2 friends, but I have a lifetime of associates because I chose those type of relationships because we were PCS and we were moving so often and so frequently that investing time in those friendships wasn't what mattered to me. Permanent change of station. We're moving so much. We moved every 3 years. We moved from one duty station, one location to another every 3 years. So there was no time to invest. But it starts with knowing yourself and knowing that you want to make a commitment to the other person to be open and honest and to be vulnerable. I mean, that's being vulnerable is the biggest part about it because, most people think that Mike's just this stoic rock that doesn't have any emotions, but I really do. I just don't show them. My son learned in 2022. He was 15 years old. That dad actually had a heart. Now, I only learned that because I had a heart attack. But dad's got a heart. It's possible. But part of that is knowing yourself and knowing how you communicate with people. I think that's why it becomes such a great relationship, is because I've allowed myself to be vulnerable in this relationship. I've allowed myself to have those conversations and not be afraid of what she's going to think of me because we have that level of comfort with each other.
Yeah, a few things that we've learned in this work that you're speaking to right now. One is like, how long, how many centuries has the golden rule been around? And how many traditions, Then why can't we do it? Like if so many of us would say, of course, I believe in that. But then where's the disconnect? Do you genuinely see every single person throughout your day with a level of dignity that is just afforded to them regardless of how they act with you? Not respect, like I know you and I respect you because of how you've acted, but dignity because you're a human, and if I don't have dignity for you, that's on me, that's not on you. And that's an interesting question for us all to struggle with, right? And what they learned in this national work they're doing called the Dignity Index is you can say, yes, I'm a respectful person. I see everybody has dignity. I love everyone. And then they come in your boardroom meeting or your classroom and they have a rubric. You guys are in higher ed, so like this, where they rank the dignity level of your conversation. And with your spouse or with your board, and it's lower than you might think. So why is that disconnect? We claim we want to do it and we don't do it, right? So I think this work is like real. It's real. And even if you're like, I don't have anybody I disagree with that much that I want to talk to, what I can tell you they're saying is have deeper conversations. Just have a deeper conversation. Even if you agree with someone. I never disagreed with my dad. I just didn't know. And then we're on this cruise together, and I'm reading a book, The Women, if you read it, about nurses in Vietnam, and my dad was a nurse in Vietnam. And I'm reading this book, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk to my dad about it, because I don't want to trigger something, I don't want him to feel bad. And then I was like, hold on a minute. What if I just at dinner said, I'm reading this book, and it's making me think about you. Is there anything you ever wanted to talk about? And my dad's 75 and I'm 50. It changed our relationship just that question that I thought, you know what, I'm gonna ask. And he could have said, oh, we don't talk about this, we don't talk about Bruno, fine. But I think having this deeper conversation where you say, I'm gonna see you as a human, I'm gonna talk to you, and I genuinely want to know your answer. What a beautiful gift. Yeah. Yeah. Other questions? Well, I hope that, first of all, I'm just grateful. I wanted to end by giving you guys a moment. You've done some of this throughout. But I wanted to end by giving you guys a moment to thank the other person maybe for something.
You first. You're first. No, you're first. You're first.
No, you. I can't be nice.
Yes, you can.
What was the question?
You'd like to thank God for
Oh, man. Dr. Andrews.
Yeah.
I would like to say thank you. No, seriously. Yeah, this is easy. I would not be who I am today as a higher education professional without your mentorship, your friendship, and your tutelage. Your willingness to engage me in conversations, your willingness to tell me I'm an idiot when I'm an idiot. She doesn't say it that way. She's very, very, very articulate in how she uses her words. But without you, I would not be as successful as I am today. So when I think about how we have civility in practice, how you and I don't agree on so many things. I will always value those conversations, but what I value the most, what I thank you the most for is just helping me navigate the waters and getting to where I am today, because you are truly an inspiration. So thank you, ma'am.
You can. I would like to thank you for helping me to reconnect with my military connection. I mean, we had a whole moment early in January when I went over to see him. We were working on something, and then at the end, he gives me this whole proclamation for the Vietnam War veterans and a pen, and I'm just like, are you serious? Like right now? Like, yeah, we're doing this right now? But that speaks to how you always show up. And I appreciate that. We're at the MLK parade. Who's there? Kev's there. I have pictures in my phone for years of him and Nitro. And so I appreciate the way that you always show up for my programs, how you always show up for me. And that I can be very transparent in having conversations with you and not feel judged. Because let's be real. You say you've been in the military 23 times, like 23 years. But I'm a Black woman. I know. And to be able to have these conversations is like, that doesn't happen much naturally. But it happens for us because we genuinely respect one another. We don't agree, like we're not gonna talk about politics. We don't agree. But we've been able to have these conversations behind closed doors, and now we gave them a snapshot of what we do, but we always walk out respecting one another. And we're never like, I don't want to work with that person. I don't want to do nothing with you. I'm not showing up for you. We never ever do that. And so I appreciate that. And our relationship has grown over the 4 years. It seems like you've been here a long time. It's only 4 years. But I also admire and appreciate what you've done for military veterans, active military veterans, connected students, families, all the things that you do, and that's inspiring for me. And I appreciate it. I appreciate Dr. Guzman telling you that you had to work with me. But I do. I appreciate you and I value you. And when you don't show up, I'm like, where's Kev? Who knows where Kev is? Let me text him and find what's going on. So I do. I appreciate you being here at the University of Central Florida.
I'm gonna finish meeting. No one voted for me. Man. I do want to add one thing to that, because we don't agree on a lot. You know, we may sit up here and joke and laugh with each other, but there's a lot of things we don't agree on. One of the things Dr. Andrews said is that not only do we agree to continue working with each other, to continue to have respectful conversations, but the other thing about it is we also agree that once we leave that conversation and we go our separate ways, is we're still gonna reflect on it, and we're still gonna think about it, and we'll revisit it. It might be 10 days, it might be 10 weeks, but we're gonna revisit it. So the one really great thing about it, being thankful for each other, is that we don't just shut our conversation. We're not afraid to continue having it. But we also give ourselves time to go back and reflect on the conversation, to figure out, in Dr. Ranger's words, why Mike's wrong, and how she's gonna convince me to come around her way of thinking. But we continue to have those conversations, and that's another reason why it's powerful to have that kind of civil discourse with each other, to reflect, to continue the dialogue, to continue the conversation, because we are not alike and we don't agree, but we still have meaningful conversation that allows us to move the needle for student success and for other things here at the university. And that's why it's so empowering.
Let's thank Kevin and Lana for opening the floor. They still don't know how to do one. Yeah. So I hope that this inspired you or gave you some little tool or something to take away today. This is the work. This is the work of our students and of us, and I'm grateful to spend time with you today. I knew them both before this, but now I know them deeper, y'all. All right, thank you. Oh, my dear Scott.
My goodness, did I say dynamic or did I say dynamic too? Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you sincerely to Dr. Hancock, Dr. Andrews, and Mr. Kepner, or as we have learned, Kep, for providing us with a strong and lively and heartfelt example of how to engage respectfully across difference and disagreement. We are incredibly appreciative. Thank you for that. As we saw, it requires an honest effort of listening to understand. It also requires an immense amount of patience, especially when topics feel deeply personal and ingrained across generations or communities. It requires navigating or coping through curiosity when ideals are at odds with one another. And it requires courage to move through it all with dignity, with hope. Do you know what else it takes? Practice. So as I mentioned before, UCF was recently awarded a $3.4 million 50 grant by the U.S. Department of Education to develop a model that can be replicated across the state on how to engage in constructive dialogue. This effort will be known as Project Civic, and Civic in this case stands for Civil Interactions and Viewpoints for Interpersonal Competence. Civic will offer several learning opportunities for students, faculty, and staff over the next 4 years, and will make the way for a new Civic Dialogue course designation. 2 faculty opportunities are currently open. All faculty are now invited to apply for our inaugural Civic track at this year's Summer Faculty Development Institute. And we are also accepting applications for our inaugural Civic Faculty Fellow. So to learn more about those opportunities, or tell a friend, you may be interested yourself, or tell a friend. To learn more, visit our Grant Initiatives and Partnerships website, click on Grants and Research, and then click on Civic. I appreciate the trust that has been bestowed upon me as project director for Civic. And I look forward to working with my dear colleague, Dr. Haley Winston, Director for Civil Discourse and Engagement, and other colleagues in faculty excellence and student success and well-being under our fearless and dedicated leadership of our Vice President, Andrea Guzman, who serves as PI on the grant. Please give the team and Dr. Guzman a round of applause. There's a lot of work to be done, and we look forward to doing that with all of you on behalf of our community. As we prepare to make our exit, we kindly ask that you please scan the QR code on your table or on your screen for those who are joining us virtually and complete the session assessment. That feedback, it really helps us to understand what's working, what's useful, and how we can continue to offer these opportunities and make them even better over time. So again, the afternoon breakout sessions include night safety with UCFPD, AI boosting productivity for success, faculty shaping student success through high impact practices, and applied practices for serving today's students through emotional intelligence, and rooms of reality right here in the Pegasus Ballroom, ABC, right next door. This concludes our luncheon session. Thank you again for joining us. And enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Take care and charge on.